The prairie was not empty, though many men swore it so. It breathed and shifted like some great, slow beast, waves of grass rising, bending, whispering secrets only the wind could understand. Coyotes sang at night, owls carried the darkness on their wings, and the river, the river, never ceased its song. It hurried through stone and sand, sometimes soft as a lullaby, sometimes fierce as judgment. On its banks that evening walked a young man who had no name that anyone remembered. Folks at the trading post called him the orphan, as if his lack of parents was a brand hotter than any iron. He had been left as a babe at a church door, wrapped in a tattered quilt that smelled of wood smoke. No note, no ring, no mother's kiss pressed into the folds. Just silence, and silence had followed him all his life. He worked where work was found, mending fences, breaking horses, carrying timber. He asked for no more than a crust of bread, a place to sleep, and a freedom to leave when the world grew too sharp against him. He belonged to no one, and worse, no one belonged to him. That evening, with the sun rolling down the sky in molten copper, he came to the river. He always drifted to water when the weight inside grew too much. Something about its endlessness made his own loneliness smaller, like a pebble compared to an ocean. He knelt, cupping his hands, drinking the cold silver. The chill shocked him awake, and for a moment he almost smiled. But then the peace broke. A cry split the air, high, sharp, swallowed by rushing current. He looked up. Downstream, a figure thrashed in the river's arms. A girl, young, her dark hair slick against her face, her body spun like driftwood in the furious pull. The orphan did not think. He dropped his satchel, tore off his boots, and plunged. The water was teeth. It bit into his chest, dragged him under, filled his ears with thunder. He fought upward, coughing, eyes burning. She was ahead, arms striking wildly, sinking again. He lunged, the river grabbing at his ankles, pulling him down as if jealous of its prey. When his hand caught her wrist, he felt more than flesh. He felt the terror of one who had nearly let go of the world. He pulled with every ounce of strength he had, kicking, tearing against the river's pull, dragging her toward shore. The mud gave way beneath his feet as he hauled her up onto the bank, both collapsing in a heap. She was still lips blue, eyes closed. For a moment, he feared the river had claimed her after all. He bent, pressed his mouth against hers, breath trembling as he pushed air into her lungs. Again and again, until at last she coughed, water spilling out, a ragged sound more beautiful than any hymn. Her eyes fluttered open, deep as night, ringed with fear but alive. She looked at him as if he were a dream between worlds. He whispered, voice rough from river water, "You're safe now." No answer came, only the faintest of nods, and her lips formed a name, Ayoka. The orphan sat back, chest heaving, unsure what to do. He had no tribe, no home, no right to this girl's world. Saving her had been instinct, not invitation. He stood slowly, brushing mud from his hands. She tried to sit, but he steadied her gently, then stepped back as shadows approached in the distance. Shapes of warriors coming down the ridge, drawn by her cry. Panic flickered in him. He had lived long enough to know how easily a white man could be misunderstood at a native girl's side. He had no wish for bloodshed. So he did what orphans learn best. He slipped away before anyone could claim him, vanishing into the twilight with nothing but the river's roar behind him. Ayoka sat trembling on the bank as the figures drew nearer, the stranger's warmth still on her hands. She turned once, searching the trees, but he was gone. And the orphan, wet clothes clinging cold, walked into the night, believing he had done nothing more than pull his soul from the river, an act soon forgotten, like a stone thrown into endless water. He did not know that by morning, the sound of hoofbeats would thunder across the plain. He did not know that 100 riders would come seeking him. He did not know that saving her life had changed the course of his own forever. Morning came pale and silver, the kind that makes the earth hold its breath before the sun climbs high. The orphan lay curled beneath a cottonwood, damp clothes stiff against his skin. He had slept fitfully, half dreaming of the river, of a girl's eyes opening to life again, of shadows rising on the ridge. A bird called above him, and the world seemed calm. For a heartbeat, he believed the night had been only a fever dream. But then the sound reached him, low, distant, rolling like thunder. Hoofbeats. He sat up, pulse tightening. Not one, not 10. Many. The ground itself trembled beneath their weight. The horizon stirred, and out of the morning mist they came. Horses fanned across the plain, manes whipping, riders dark against the sun. Their lances caught the light. Faces painted, feathers streaming, eyes sharp as hawks. The earth shook with their passage. 100 warriors. The orphan's first thought was flight. His legs itched to run, but there was nowhere to run. 100 riders could chase him into the bones of the desert. His second thought was surrender. Let them take him, and it quickly. A life like his had little to lose. But then he remembered her, the girl in the river, Ayoka, the breath he had forced in her lungs. He remembered the way her fingers had clutched weakly at his sleeve, not wanting to let go. Perhaps this was the river's price. The riders circled him, dust rising in a storm. Spears lowered, bows strung. He stood very still, arms at his sides, trying not to show the fear gnawing inside him. From among them rode a man whose presence was heavy as stone. Broad shoulders, hair streaked with gray, an eagle feather at his brow. His horse was painted in symbols of lightning and sun. He dismounted slowly, eyes fixed upon the orphan. The circle tightened. Silence thickened. The chief spoke, his words in Apache, but his tone cut sharp and clear. Another warrior translated roughly into broken English. You pulled her from the river. You breathed life into the chief's daughter. The orphan swallowed hard. He nodded once. The chief studied him for a long, unbroken moment. Then he said something more, and the translator's voice carried it. The river has chosen. You are no longer alone. Confusion swept the orphan. He half expected anger, punishment, suspicion. Instead, there was honor, as if his act had pulled him across an unseen threshold. The warriors did not bind him. They did not strike him. They beckoned. He followed, surrounded on all sides, the plain opening before them like a painted canvas. The sound of 100 horses moving as one was like being carried in the heart of a storm. Dust rose and sunlight turned it to gold. By noon, they reached the village. Lodges of hide stood in circles, smoke curling skyward. Children ran to meet the riders. Women emerged with baskets of food. Dogs barked. And there, at the center, Ayoka waited. She stood wrapped in a blanket, hair still damp, eyes fixed on him. Not with fear, not with distrust, but with a quiet gravity, as if she had known all along that he would be brought here. The orphan's chest tightened. That night, the camp came alive. Fires burned bright. Drums echoed into the stars. Voices rose in song. The orphan sat apart at first, unsure, his hands knotted in his lap. But slowly they drew him in, a bowl of stew placed before him, a child's laughter tugging at his sleeve, a warrior's nod of respect across the flames. Ayoka sat nearby, silent, her gaze sometimes drifting to him. She did not speak, yet her nearness was like the warmth of the fire itself. For the first time in his life, the orphan felt something he could not name. It was not quite belonging, not yet, but it was the beginning of a road. When the night grew deep, the chief rose, lifting his staff to the sky. His voice carried, strong and solemn, as if calling the stars to witness. The translator's words followed. By sacred tradition, the one who saves blood becomes blood. The orphan is orphan no more. From this night, he is kin to our people. The camp erupted in voices, cheers, cries of approval. Children danced. Warriors beat their drums harder. The orphan sat stunned, heart pounding. Family, kin, words he had never tasted on his own tongue, now being given to him as freely as breath. Ayoka's eyes found his through the firelight. In them he saw something steady, something that did not frighten him. Not possession, not demand. Simply recognition. The orphan lowered his head, tears stinging his eyes. The river had carried more than one life to shore that night. And yet, he could not help but wonder. Could a man born of no tribe, of no home, truly be made family by tradition? Could kindness once given a race years of solitude? The fire crackled, and the question lingered, like sparks rising into the night sky. The prairie night was never truly silent. Crickets stitched the darkness with their fiddles, coyotes cried on the far ridges, and the stars themselves seemed to hum like a choir of cold fire. Yet in the village, another sound rose, a living sound full of warmth and rhythm. Drums beat low and steady, voices rose in song, and laughter moved like a current through the lodges. The orphan sat near the great fire, shoulders hunched, hands clasped between his knees. The flames painted his face in copper and shadow. All around him, life thrived, children darting in play, elders smoking long pipes, women weaving baskets by firelight. He watched as if through glass, as if he were still outside the circle. And then a little hand tugged at his sleeve. A boy no older than 7 stood beside him, eyes bright with mischief. Without a word, the child pressed a strip of roasted meat into his palm, then ran off, giggling. The orphan stared at the food, then at the boy's back, disappearing into the crowd. A laugh, his own, soft, unfamiliar, escaped his throat. He ate. Later, one of the warriors, tall, scarred down his cheek, kindness in his eyes, sat down beside him. No words, just a nod, the kind men give when they recognize something of themselves in another. That nod meant more than whole speeches ever had in his life. Slowly, the ice around him began to crack. Across the fire sat Ayoka. Her blanket slipped from her shoulders, revealing the shimmer of beaded dress beneath. Her hair was loose, dark waves catching the light. She was not watching the dancers or the fire. She was watching him. When their eyes met, she did not look away. It was not boldness. It was not shyness. It was something quieter, recognition, as if she too had walked with shadows and knew what it was to stand at the edge of belonging. The orphan looked down, embarrassed by the sudden heat in his chest. He had known many looks in his life. Pity from priests, suspicion from townsfolk, contempt from ranchers. But never this. Never a gaze that did not judge or demand, only saw. Days passed, and he remained among them. He learned to ride with the children, who treated him not as stranger, but as brother. He carried wood for the old ones, who touched his arm in thanks. He watched the hunters return, bringing food not just for kin, but for all. Everything here was shared, sorrow, work, laughter. A man was not left to starve alone. A woman was not left to grieve alone. A child was not left to play alone. He began to wonder if the river had washed more than mud from his skin. Perhaps it had washed loneliness away too. Yet, doubts lingered like burrs in his heart. One evening, while the fires burned low, Ayoka came to him. She brought no words at first, only a wooden bowl filled with corn stew. She placed it in his hands, then sat beside him in the grass. They ate in silence. The night air was cool, the stars sharp as flint. At last she spoke, her voice soft as water moving over stone. I thought the river would take me. I was ready, but then I felt a hand. He swallowed, staring into the bowl. His voice was rough when it came. I was left once too, as a child. Someone set me down on a church step and walked away. I know what it is to feel the world let go. Her eyes turned to him, full of quiet sorrow, not pity. Then perhaps it was not the river, but sorrow itself, that brought us together. They fell silent again, yet the silence was not empty. It was full of things unspoken, things understood without need of speech. That night, as the fire cracked and the village slept, the orphan lay awake listening to the breath of the world. For the first time, the loneliness that had shadowed him all his life did not feel endless. It felt as though someone had set a candle inside it. But shadows do not vanish easily. Among the warriors was one who did not welcome him. A young brave, proud, shoulders squared with the arrogance of youth. His name was Takoda. He had known Ayoka since childhood. They had played by the same streams, gathered berries in the same woods, listened to the same stories by the same fires. In his eyes, she belonged to him, by history, by unspoken promise. Takoda watched the orphan with cold suspicion. He saw the way Ayoka's gaze lingered too long, the way children tugged at his sleeve, the way elders began to accept him. Each small sign was like salt ground into his pride. One evening, while the men gathered for talk, Takoda spoke loudly, his words like arrows tipped with poison. A stranger cannot be family. A man with no blood has no roots. Can a tree without roots stand against storm? Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, some frowned. The orphan sat still, head bowed, shame burning hot in his chest. But the chief silenced the talk with a single raised hand. The river chooses. It gives. It takes. None may argue with the river. The matter ended there, but Takoda's eyes burned hotter than the fire. Days turned to nights, and the orphan began to feel the weight of choice pressing upon him. Could he truly belong here? Or is he only a shadow passing through? And what of Ayoka, with her quiet strength and eyes that seemed to carry entire worlds? One evening, she found him again by the river's edge, the same river that had brought them together. She stood close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Do you wish to leave?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "I don't know. Everywhere I go, I end up outside. Looking in, I don't want to lose this too." She turned to him, her voice steady. "No one can take away what the river gives back." The words struck deep, lodging in his soul. He wanted to believe them. But somewhere in the darkness beyond, Takoda watched. And in his silence grew a vow that before the next moon was full, the orphan would be cast out and the river's gift undone. All through the day, the clouds gathered, pressing low and heavy over the plains like a great hand. The air smelled of iron, the hush before storm. Horses grew restless, stamping at the ground, ears twitching. The village itself seemed to breathe uneasily, as though the wind carried whispers of things to come. The orphan felt it too, a weight in his chest, a knowing. He had lived long enough with loneliness to recognize when fate was about to speak. That evening, as the fire circles began, Takoda stepped forward. His shoulders squared, eyes sharp with firelight, his voice carrying over the camp. "The river may give, but men must prove themselves. This stranger has eaten our food, sat by our fires, walked among our children. But can he stand as one of us?" Murmurs rose. The chief's gaze was steady, unreadable. Takoda lifted his hand, pointing toward the orphan. "I challenge him. Not to death, not to hate, to trial. Let him show his spirit. If the river truly sent him, he will stand." A hush fell. All eyes turned to the orphan. His heart pounded like the drums. He had no words, only silence, only the ache of a lifetime spent being tested by the world without ever being asked. The chief rose. His staff struck the ground once. "So it shall be. At dawn, the trial." Dawn came gray and wild. The storm had broken in the night, leaving the earth soaked, the river swollen and fierce. The sky still growled with thunder, as though the spirits themselves were watching. The people gathered at the riverbank, the same river that had first tied his fate to theirs. Warriors lined the edge. Women and children stood in silence, faces solemn. Takoda stood proud, spear in hand, body gleaming with paint. The orphan faced him with nothing but his bare strength, clothes still patched and worn. The chief's voice carried. "The trial is simple. Cross the river's fury and return with fire still alive. For if a man can carry flame through water, he carries the heart of the people." The orphan stared at the river, its current raging, swollen with storm. Impossible. And yet, hadn't he already crossed it once, dragging Ayoka from its teeth? A torch was lit, flame trembling against the wind. It was placed in his hands. Another in Takoda's. The chief lifted his staff. "Begin." Takoda leapt first, plunging into the torrent with a warrior's cry. The orphan followed, the cold striking his chest, the current ripping at his legs. One arm clutched the torch high, the other fought the river. The water rose, fierce and hungry. Takoda surged ahead, powerful strokes cutting through the flood. The orphan stumbled, dragged under, darkness filling his eyes. The torch hissed low, flames sputtering. In that moment, memory rose like breath itself. The night he had been left on the church steps, the years of silence, the girl's lips blue with death until his breath gave her life. And then Ayoka's words, soft and steady. No one can take away what the river gives back. He kicked, fought upward, broke the surface gasping. The flame, still there, trembling but alive. He held it higher, teeth gritted, body screaming. Step by step, he forced himself across, every muscle straining. Takoda reached the far bank first. He turned, fire lifted in triumph, but the wind caught, rain lashed, and his torch sputtered died. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The orphan stumbled onto the bank moments later, knees sinking into mud. His torch flickered wildly, guttering, then flared steady again, stubborn against storm. Alive. The camp erupted in cries, drums thundered, voices rose like waves. The chief stepped forward, lifted the orphan's arm high, flame blazing against the dark sky. Blood my blood, son of my people. The words broke him. Tears burned his eyes, but he did not hide them. For the first time, he was not ashamed to be seen. Takoda stood silent, his pride broken not by defeat, but by truth. He turned away, and the crowd's voices swallowed his shadow. And then Ayoka was there. She did not run, did not fling herself upon him. She simply stood, close enough that he could feel her presence like the heat of the torch. Their eyes met, and in that gaze was no demand, no claim, only a promise. Not of passion alone, but of understanding, of two souls pulled from the river of sorrow into the same shore. The orphan lowered the torch, its flame steady in the rain. For the first time, the horizon did not look empty. It looked like home, and so it was that an orphan, nameless and rootless, found himself reborn not through blood, but through water. The river that once threatened to take a life had given him a family. The hands that once held nothing now held fire. Out here in the Wild West, where loneliness stretched wider than the sky, a single act of kindness could ripple outward until it changed everything. He had pulled a girl from the river, and the river had pulled him from his solitude. Perhaps that is the way of life. We save each other without knowing it. We belong to one another more deeply than we dare to believe. Friend, if you've walked with me through this tale, take a moment now to rest by the fire. Think of the river in your own life, the moments where you were carried or where you carried another. Think of the family you found, whether by blood or by kindness. Stories like this are not just about the West. They are about us, all of us, searching for home, for belonging, for hands that will not let go. If this story stirred your heart, linger a while. Leave a thought, share a memory. Tell me where in this wide world you are listening from. I'd love to know. These Wild West tales live longer when they're carried in many hearts across many lands. Until the next fire is lit, ride gentle, friend.